We are live.
Good afternoon, Adam. Am I live? Can you hear me? Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm really grateful to my friend and colleague from across the river in New York, Attorney General Tish James, who's joining us here. I also want to thank Attorney General Andrea Campbell from Massachusetts, who could not be here but was a co-lead in the lawsuit that we are announcing on behalf of 21 states and the District of Columbia, challenging the legal basis for the Trump administration's reckless and illegal campaign to cut billions of dollars of critical funding to states. Since President Trump took office 5 months ago, this administration has mounted an unprecedented and unlawful effort to cut federal funding to our states, to essentially gut this funding. This administration has deprived states of tens of billions of dollars of federal funding without any advance notice and despite the clear will of Congress, which appropriated money for the very programs that the administration has terminated. These cuts, which have been made at the direction of the president and the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, have devastated essential programs that millions of Americans depend on. Programs that help us fight violent crime, that support life-saving medical and scientific research, that ensure our kids have access to safe drinking water, and so much more. And there's no immediate end in sight as federal agencies continue to gut additional vital programs almost every single day. This indiscriminate slash and burn campaign is reckless, but it's also illegal. The Trump administration claims that it's discovered massive power to terminate billions of dollars of funding based on a single provision consisting of just 5 words that's buried deep in the recesses of the federal regulations related to the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB. That provision says that federal agencies may terminate funding when it, quote, no longer effectuates agency priorities. Those are the 5 words. But the provision has never been understood to give federal agencies a blank check to terminate funding already awarded to states just because the administration decides on a whim that it doesn't like a particular program that it already chose to fund. And yet that's exactly the unfettered authority the president now claims, even though his own administration made clear back in 2020 that this provision does not give him that power. It's yet another example of the president ignoring the law and acting like a king. If he wanted to make these cuts, he's currently going through a budget process. There are, in many cases, ways legally he can do it, but he's choosing to disregard the law, disregard the Constitution, and punish states and, most importantly, the people who rely on these services across the country. And the consequences to them have been severe. This administration, just to give you a sense, has claimed that priorities have changed and cut critical public safety funding that keeps New Jerseyans and millions of Americans safe. For example, they've cut millions of dollars for automated license plate readers that help us fight violent crime and investigate bias crimes. They've also cut community-based violence intervention programs, which have contributed to the lowest level of gun violence in New Jersey history for 2 years running. And just on the license plate readers and how important these are as a law enforcement tool, 2.5 years ago, my own synagogue was firebombed with a Molotov cocktail. We worked hand in hand with the federal government and ultimately apprehended the individual and charged him and prosecuted him, thanks principally to the use of license plate readers that were installed nearby the synagogue. Apparently, despite all their talk of anti-Semitism, catching people who target churches or synagogues or mosques or anybody is no longer a priority of this administration, according to their own words. This administration has claimed its priorities have changed and has cut funding for life-saving medical and scientific research. It's claimed its priorities have changed and cut funding for our neediest students to have access to quality meals and for programs that ensure our food banks have enough food to feed the hungry. The administration has claimed that its priorities have changed and that it no longer wishes to support research to stop forever chemicals that are poisoning our drinking water. The administration has claimed that its priorities have changed and no longer cares about stopping fraud in our unemployment insurance systems. A little ironic given that these cuts are coming from DOJ, which claims it's prioritized rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. These cuts are staggering admissions of what this administration is no longer prioritizing. And I'm reminded of the harms that they're causing constantly by the mother on a soccer field who came up to me crying, worried about her son's services, her autistic child's services getting cut. I'm reminded of it when I talk to law enforcement officers whose services and salaries have been unceremoniously slashed by this administration, which is why today we're suing to stop the administration from unlawfully using this 5-word provision to put our residents in harm's way. Harm's way by shuttering critical programs and deciding arbitrarily to strip away funding from our states. We're seeking a court order making clear that the federal agency's lack of authority to use this 5-word provision buried deep in OMB regulations to terminate billions of dollars of federal funds appropriated by Congress on a whim. Already in these first 5 months of the Trump administration, we've sued many times to stop funding cuts. Just days into the administration, we successfully sued to block the across-the-board funding freeze this administration tried to do, ham-handed as it was, that would have frozen trillions of dollars of funding for states and individuals across the country. We successfully sued to block threatened cuts to funding for public safety, counterterrorism, transportation infrastructure, and education, as well as to stop cuts to public health funding and to medical and scientific research. So let me be clear for anyone listening today. We're going to go to court whenever and wherever the president violates the law and harms our residents. This includes by unlawfully cutting our funding, devastating our residents in ways that hurt them severely. We can't just sit back and wait for the next set of cuts when we know the president and DOJ have directed the administration to continue to use this obscure provision in a slash and burn campaign. These reckless funding cuts aren't going to stop unless courts make clear to this administration its obligation to comply with the law. That's why today's lawsuit is so important, why I'm so proud to be leading it alongside Attorney General James and Attorney General Campbell and a coalition of 21 states in the District of Columbia who are standing up for their residents as well and for their right to not be harmed arbitrarily by a president that's acting like a king. It's now my honor to turn the mic over to somebody who has a distinguished record in fighting for the residents of her state and is not afraid to take anybody on, Attorney General Tish James of New York.
Good afternoon. It is truly an honor and a privilege to join Attorney General Platkin and Attorney General Campbell in her absence and all of my other colleagues as we defend our states against dangerous attempts to cut off critical resources and services our communities depend upon. From the very first week of this administration, we have seen federal agencies jeopardize billions of dollars in grant funding for health care and child care that families need, life-saving medical research, programs that help vulnerable students succeed in our schools, and so much more. Together, we have filed a dozen lawsuits to stop these funding cuts and restore the resources our states rely on. And today is no different. Today, we are suing to attack this administration's primary strategy for making massive illegal cuts to federal grants with 5 consequential and dangerous words. Those words are no longer effectuates agency priorities. This administration has used that one clause in the Office of Management and Budget Regulations to justify withholding billions of dollars in grants to the states. According to the Trump administration, federal agencies can come up with new agency priorities and then use those to cancel any grants they want that do not align with their political preferences. They have used this regulation to slash resources from everything, from life-saving medical research to law enforcement to improvements to state unemployment systems that help those who lost their jobs. that is not only destructive and dangerous, it is flat out illegal. Congress, not the president, has the power of the purse, and Congress makes policy judgments, not the president. When our representatives pass a law to dedicate funding for our states, federal agencies cannot overrule them on a whim or based on their political preferences. And so today, we are suing to put a stop to this and prevent the administration from misusing this regulation to make future cuts that hurt our states. And we are seeking a ruling from the court that this administration cannot use this regulation for massive, indiscriminate funding cuts. We are suing once again to uphold the law and the Constitution and to protect the resources that our states and our communities count on each and every day. And now I'd like to turn it back to my very good friend, Attorney General Matt Platkin of the great state of New Jersey.
Thank you, General James. Mike, I think you're going to tee up some questions.
Jump in, give some instructions if I can. If the reporters who are here have a question, if you can press the raise hand button, then we'll call on you at that point and unmute your microphone. We ask that the questions stay on topic. We've got interest from obviously a number of states, and so any parochial questions, you can just direct those to the individual Attorney General offices, and we'll get back to you. And if your question is for one of the attorneys general in particular, you said at the top. So we'll start with Eric Larson of Bloomberg News.
Yes, hello. I'm curious to know if any of these other lawsuits over the spending cuts, if this particular OMB provision, these 5 words, has already come up in any of your arguments in those cases, and if so, if any judges have weighed in on them in any of their rulings so far.
Thanks, Eric. It has come up in a couple of the cases. We can follow up with you and get you the specific details. I believe the DOE and HHS and maybe the NIH cases, which again, we've obtained injunctions in all of these cases because the administration has continuously illegally cut funding and forgotten that Congress, not the president, has the power of the purse, as Attorney General James said. Tish, I don't know if there's anything else you'd want to add.
No,
there.
those are the 3 cases that come to mind. Those are the cases where they have basically engaged in these broad and sweeping cuts to these programs that our states rely upon. We have argued consistently that it's in violation of the Constitution and the rule of law and the Administrative Procedure Act, and we are confident at the end of the day we will be successful in this litigation as well.
Yeah, and Eric, I would just note that in those cases, there were also other grounds that the court decided those injunctions on. So what we're asking for here is a declaratory judgment, in addition to Administrative Procedure Act violations, a declaratory judgment that they have to stop doing this, that it's unlawful, and they can't rely on a 5-word provision buried deep in a federal regulation to illegally slash billions of dollars of services.
Great, thank you.
Other reporters have questions, please press the raise hand button and we would unmute you at that point. Okay. No additional questions. Turn it back, I guess, to you, General Platkin.
Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Attorney General James, and to your team, and to Attorney General Andrea Campbell and her team in Massachusetts, and to the teams and offices across the country. And thanks, everyone, for getting on, and we look forward to litigating this case and getting relief for our residents.
Thank you.